Good morning, Patrick. How are you?
I'm doing well. Working a lot more remotely than usual and a lot of hand washing. How about you?
Same as you, same as you. So for the viewers out there who don't know you, this is Patrick Hartford from Notice Connect. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, Patrick, and about your company and what you've been up to.
Yeah, so I'm originally a lawyer and I started Notice Connect at first to deal with the issue of advertising for creditors in the context of estate administration. So when someone dies, you have to handle the estate, you have to pay off any debts of the deceased. And one of the things you're supposed to do is put out a public notice giving any creditors a last chance to collect from the estate. And publishing that notice is an important way for people to avoid being liable for those debts themselves as the estate trustee. And so we started in that space and then got confirmation that these could be done online on our web platform rather than in print newspapers. And then when we got so much of the profession using this, and it really became simply the industry standard for this aspect of estate administration, we then expanded into building out what we call the Canada Will Registry. So we are helping people register their wills, whether individually or through a law firm, helping law firms manage the documents that they have, and they have to store originals, being sure that they can keep track of everything. And then we allow people to search and find those relevant documents when it's time to administer the estate. So that's what Notice Connect has been building and working on over these last few years.
Okay, that's so Patrick, I have a question. I actually know the answer to this because we at Axess Law actually register almost all of our wills with you. I love what you've done. I really, really love what you've put together, and I think it's a long time coming. But for people who may not be as familiar with your Canada Will Registry, maybe paint us a picture. Let's say, for example, I have someone close to me who's passed away, and I'm looking for their will. What would I do?
So we set up the Canada Will Registry so that anyone is able to search for that, for a will. So what you would do is you would go to our website, either noticeconnect.com or also canadawillregistry.org. And as someone who's looking for a will, you can submit a search query. So it's as simple as filling out a form on the website. You would say your name, the deceased individual's date of birth. You would have to provide your contact information, and you would state why it is you're looking for this will. What's your connection with the testator? There's a small $95 fee to do that can be dispersed, charged back to the estate. And then what happens is we set this up in a way that makes sure that we're respecting confidentiality and privacy, which is obviously a big component when you're doing a will registry. So when you submit your search, we take that and compare your search terms against our database, currently about 150,000 registered wills, and we identify in our system if there's any matches. We then send you a search certificate saying exactly what you submitted for your search terms, time-stamped, a reference number for our database, and we have on that certificate that we've told anyone who has a matching will to get in touch with you within 30 days. So this certificate is proof that you did your homework, you did your due diligence, that you checked against the 150,000 wills. So it's proof that you made an honest to goodness best effort to find out if there's anything missing out there. So that when you're continuing and administering the estate for this deceased person, if another document surfaces or if anyone accuses you of not having taken all the proper steps to find a will, you have proof that you in fact did the most meaningful step there is. And then what we do is our system will alert any law firm that registered that will. So maybe if it's Axess Law, for example, we'd send a notification to Axess Law. We'd pass along your name as the searcher, the reason you searched, all of that information. And then they can take a look at that and just verify that you're someone who they can disclose that information to. So they might ask for additional information. They might need a death certificate, for example. But this way they can make sure that they're only disclosing the existence and location of a will to someone who's entitled to that answer. So you get, as the searcher, proof that you did your homework and proof that you did your due diligence. and then the law firm gets notified, and then they still get to maintain the privacy and confidentiality and only reach out when they know that they're allowed to. So that's how we've struck that balance.
That really highlights to us why Notice Connect and Canada Will Registry is so valuable to consumers. From a lawyer's perspective, what would you say is the main selling feature or the advantage to a lawyer? And again, I kind of know why it's so important to us and why we've loved using it, but why would a lawyer be interested in using this?
Yep, there's a couple big draws for law firms to use the Canada Will Registry beyond the public good of having it. One of the big ones is that when a law firm registers their wills with us, there's no cost to do that. And importantly, everything that they register, they get access to in a digital will vault. So a lot of law firms right now are still keeping track of the wills that they're holding with Excel files, or in some cases an index card system, or some just have envelopes with names on them in alphabetical order. So this is a much more powerful set of tools to be able to search through the records you have, add notes, close old files, keeping track of everything. Especially now with a lot of people working from home, since it's a cloud-based system, it's something that can be securely accessed, whether you're in the office or working from a home office. So the will vault management aspect is one big draw. And then I would say the second one is a lot of law firms want to know if they've drafted a will for someone and that person has died. So it's helpful being notified, and that way they can be in touch with the person who's looking for the will. Potentially that person might need somebody to be doing the estate administration work, and also keeping the lawyer's files current. A lot of law firms are holding wills for people that quite likely are dead, but they have to be careful, and they end up holding a lot of extra paper and keeping a lot of extra space full. So this is helpful on both of those fronts.
That's great. That's great. That's a wonderful description. And I know we've been so excited about what you guys have been doing over there. I think it's a long time coming. It's actually shocking to a large extent that we haven't had something like this set up previously. And that isn't to take away from any of the innovation that you're doing, but it's a long time coming. It's really wonderful. And the fact that you've been able to get the Law Society and so many firms on board with you so quickly, I think really just underlines how much this has been needed. Now, recently, I know, just to kind of jump into the next topic, which I think is interesting and really important for a lot of people, it's something that we've been struggling with for a long time. I know you and I have had conversations for well over a year now about our efforts to virtualize the will signing, will execution process. For those of you who don't know, Axess has been offering virtual will drafting appointments for, again, over a year now, but we were never able to get around the execution component. So we would be able to have a video conference appointment with a client. They'd be sitting on their couch, wherever they are, not in Toronto, and we could draft their will for them, and they would end up with a wonderful will that has, great tax advice, legal advice, whatever you might need. The problem is they still have to get it executed. So I know you and the team at Notice Connect recently started a petition, which is gaining a lot of support. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're very privileged to have so much of the estates community using Notice Connect. There's the will registry, and then, like I mentioned at the beginning, for the notices to creditors. And so over the last few years, we've really become quite immersed with that group of estate practitioners, and they know that we're working, in the technology space and, coming up with solutions for lawyers. And so many of them reached out to us during the COVID crisis and the lockdown, just to share the concerns they had about updating wills for clients. So many people now are updating their wills, just given the nature of what's going on. They want to have an up-to-date estate plan. Maybe they're making a will for the first time. And so they obviously want to work with their lawyer to do that. And Ontario has very strict rules for what constitutes a valid will. So obviously the person who is signing the will, the person who's making the will, the testator, has to sign it, and it has to be done in the presence of two witnesses. And this is really at odds now with the need and the push for social distancing, because when you have two witnesses sign your will, and the idea is we want to make sure that, you know, it's a very important document. We want to have some safeguards built in to make sure that it's authentic. But there are limits on who's even allowed to be the witness. So, you know, if somebody's making a will and they're giving their estate in the will, the leftover to their children, those children are not allowed to be the witnesses. To be a valid witness, you can't be getting something from the will. And so with people being told to stay home, you know, either on their own or with their families, it's really quite difficult to find two witnesses to sign and verify that this is a valid will. And we heard from our clients about some, you know, very serious circumstances. One lawyer told us about a client who's a quadriplegic and has, you know, very limited mobility. Another one who's immunocompromised, and it's, you know, exceptionally high risk for someone to be coming in, you know, for a lawyer to come in or to have neighbors come in to be witnessing it. We obviously don't want people having to gather in the same space and risk transmitting anything, but at the same time, people want to update their wills. And so we decided, since we've got so much of the estates community as an audience, that we were going to push for the Ontario government to update the rules for the Succession Law Reform Act, just to confirm that the witnesses, so that someone who is witnessing this person signing their will, it can be either in person, which is how it's always been done, or virtually. And I think that, you know, with so many people using video conferencing, with so many people working from home, these tools have really come a long way. You can record that interaction. There's a lot of ways you can have safeguards, and I think honestly make it even more secure and, you know, better protection than an in-person signing if you do it the right way. So we really wanted to put that out there for the profession, and really, you know, show that the government, that, you know, practitioners and people who are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis were really behind this change. So we put that out about a week ago. We've got over 1,000 signatures. The Globe and Mail wrote about it this morning, and some really, you know, big names and firms that have been supporting it in the wills and estate space. And so we're going to send that over to the Attorney General's office today. So we're hopeful that they can make that change, and it'll be just safer and easier for people to make their wills, and, you know, safer for the clients and safer for the law firms and the lawyers as well.
That's great, Patrick. That's excellent. And I can tell you from our perspective, we've been in conversations with the Attorney General's office for over a year as well. And I know that they're very receptive to change, to efforts in general that are you know, meant to help the access to justice cause, and just make you know, mobility issues as well, addressing them, and even people in remote communities who have a hard time doing certain things because they don't have access to commissioners or courts or whatever it is. Now, I know that the Law Society recently put out an opinion that they are now permitting and in support of, provided we use reasonability, virtual commissioning and the virtual verification of ID, which is great and something that I think has also been a long time coming. But that does lend a lot of credibility to this cause, this petition that you put out as well, because what this is, you know, the body that oversees lawyers in Ontario essentially saying, look, you're allowed to take an oath by video conference. And part of that is a function of, I'm witnessing you giving an oath. I'm witnessing you giving an oath and then signing a piece of paper. So just conceptually, I think that that's a really, it's a really significant thing.
I agree completely.
Why do you think it's taken, this is a big question, and I know we don't have an hour to talk today, but why do you think it's taken so long for people to jump on board? Is it just kind of, you know, people have been blasé about it? Why have we not had a larger push when this has caused a severe access to justice issue for a long time? We get dozens of calls every week from people who are in hospitals, or for whatever other reason, they can't leave the home and can't have their wills executed, can't even often have them drafted. We try to do it, but we can't do everyone's. Why do you think it's taken so long, and what do you think the main obstacles have been?
I think these rules have been around for hundreds of years, and so I think there's a reluctance to change them, even in the face of evidence of mounting problems. So I think that, there's definitely a perfectionist streak in the profession, and people wanting to make sure that, we don't change the rules in a way that's going to accidentally make things worse. Obviously, it's very important that we do have the safeguards in place so that people can't be creating fraudulent wills, or you can't have people, off screen causing undue influence. But the technology is in a place now, which I think is a big reason why it's moving in that direction and moving a lot faster. Is I think the technology is in a place where we can do this securely. And I think that those strains were always there even before this pandemic. But I think we're seeing those such an increase in strain so quickly that it's really bringing to the forefront how unsustainable some of these practices were. So I think it's really accelerated. I think it was always going to go in this direction, but I think the events of the last few weeks have accelerated that timeline quite dramatically. I think that even though there are always risks when you make any kinds of changes, we're at a point now where the risk of the downside of not making changes is so apparent and so huge that I think we're starting to see people rally behind, sensible, incremental changes that can be done with the right safeguards. So it took a long time to get here, but with everything changing so quickly, I think it's really going to accelerate the pace and hopefully move to some very sensible reforms that can help on those access to justice points.
Yeah, I think, yes, point taken. So a lot of times fear prevents us from making progress, and it also eventually prompts us to make the progress.
I think so.
Couple more quick questions before we let you move on with your day. Have you noticed a lot more wills are being registered in the last few days, or last few weeks, I should say? Are you? I'm noticing a lot of people want to have their wills drafted. They don't necessarily want to come to the office, which is understandable and probably the right decision. But are you noticing a big increase in the number of wills that your team's registering?
Yes. So we have wills come to us in two ways. The first is through law firms. So we're seeing law firms that had been looking at the will registry or had heard about the Canada Will Registry, and now they're really pushing to register their existing wills because so many of their staff are working from home. They obviously want to make sure that they're going to be able to keep their will vault organized and managed and current without someone having to go into the office and update a card system, to be able to look up important information without having to go into a physical office and do that. So we're seeing much more registrations just of existing wills on that front. And the second way we get wills is from individuals can also register their own will with us directly. And we're seeing a very substantial spike in that because I think that people are, like you said, going to you guys, they're updating their wills, they're wanting to make sure that they've got everything in place. And then they want to make sure that those documents are in fact found. So they're coming to us and we're seeing quite a spike in will registration, which I think is very important because the will is only helpful if it can actually be found when it's needed. Otherwise, presume that you tore it up and you might as well not have made it. So if you're going to put the effort into drafting a will and you obviously care enough about what happens to your estate afterwards, then it's important that those steps are taken to make sure that it's found. So a lot of what's happening now is really bringing that to a head.
Perfect. Patrick, anything else you want to tell us about Notice Connect, Canada Will Registry? Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up?
That's a good question. I think we've covered a lot of the main points. The only thing I'd say is left to just emphasize is how excited we are to be part of this solution. The big thing that has really kept us motivated and fired up is the really encouraging feedback we've gotten from individuals, from people who signed our petition. I think Margaret Atwood even shared it and talked about how important this was. It was quite cool for us to see.
That's great.
We also have had tremendous feedback from the Law Society here in Ontario, as well as others across the country. I think everyone's seen the need for what we've done and what we've built. And the lawyers who are using it are very happy with being able to keep everything organized. And so that encouragement and excitement and people saying that, they're so glad to finally see this being built has, kept the whole team really motivated and really working hard to keep running with this. Because I think this is really the beginning of some pretty, important changes that we're going to see with the rules and with, modernizing the justice system. So it's a lot of fun on our end to be part of that, and we're really excited.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your time today. I'm really happy that we had a chance to connect and you had a chance to kind of explain what's been happening. Things are just changing so quickly from day to day. Your team is often in the middle of a lot of these changes, and it's really nice that we have the ability to kind of share this with everybody. So
well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me about this.
Oh, pleasure. Hopefully in another week or two, we're going to have even more updates that we can share with everyone.
Fingers crossed. And hopefully before too long, we'll be able to do an interview and a conversation in person.
Sounds good. Well, until next time, everybody stay safe, stay clean, wash your hands, and we will chat soon.